Hey y'all, it's Andrew with Free Tours by Foot New Orleans. Today we are spending some time with good old Kayla again, and we are doing something, I want to say we've never done this before. We have never gone inside during one of these things. We've been outdoors for a year now. But yeah, we wanted to introduce y'all to a historic interior of a New Orleans house. And Kayla, the connoisseurs of the channel know you for your food expertise, but you're the one who made this happen. How does that happen? What strings did you have to pull?
Yeah, so I'm also a real estate agent, and I had the fortune of showing this house to a client of mine. I fell in love with it. I thought it was such a beautiful example of a modern renovation that maintains respect for the historic structure, the historic story of the house. And so I asked if we could make a video here. And we were fortunate, and the owner and her agent were very gracious and have allowed us to be here today.
Yeah, so if y'all watch this very soon after it's airing, the place is for sale. Yes. And if you watch it a few weeks later, well, probably grabbed up by then.
This all could be yours.
We get a decent number of people, surprising number, watching our videos saying either that they are planning on moving within New Orleans, or they're looking at moving home to New Orleans, or maybe they're looking to move here for the first time. When you meet people and you're showing them their options in town, like, do you think there's something essentially different about looking at houses in New Orleans versus in a lot of other cities?
Yes, well, I can't speak to other cities, but I know we have some very unique dynamics here in New Orleans. We have a large diversity of neighborhoods. I don't know the number, but there's like 30 neighborhoods in a relatively small city here in New Orleans. They all have a very distinctive feel. And so showing people enough of the city that they can really find the space that's theirs, that really speaks to them, is important. We have a lot of historical structures like this one, and there are unique challenges that come with owning older homes. They sometimes need upgrades. The upkeep can be a sizable expense. And so preparing people for that as well. And then we have flood dynamics still today that we deal with. And so guiding people to the areas that are up higher ground, where they're in a flood zone that's going to be affordably insurable for them. Those are all things that we think about.
Sure. And in this case, we're in the historic Treme, really close to the French Quarter. We are, I guess, when you bring like the tour guide historian mindset on one hand, and then also the knowledge of the finer things in life, I'm sure you end up pointing out that right down at the corner is Little Dizzy's awesome restaurant, and things like that are totally part of the decision-making process too, I gotta guess.
The musical history of Treme is great. Kermit Ruffin's Mother-in-Law Lounge, great venue for music. It's just a couple blocks from here. Yeah. Nice. So it's a vibrant neighborhood. It's deeply historic. Some say even the oldest African-American owned neighborhood in the country. So it has a lot of history, a lot to offer, and most people are familiar with Treme. It's probably the most well-known neighborhood in New Orleans aside from the French Quarter because of the HBO series named Treme. So it's something that resonates with people pretty quickly.
So should people who are interested in shopping around be contacting you?
Absolutely, yeah. If you are looking to buy, rent, or even if you're in New Orleans and you're looking to sell, then I'm your gal. And I guess we'll put my contact information in the comment section of the video. And you guys can reach out to me if you have any questions at all about anything real estate related here.
And even for people who aren't necessarily looking to have a place here, I mean, if you're coming to visit, a lot of people who stay in a short-term rental, they're looking for a historic property of some kind. And even if you're just like going to shops and restaurants in the French Quarter, a lot of those were houses. They're historic buildings, and if you know your house types, and you know what the features of these interiors are, it just adds like a layer of depth to the experience all around.
Absolutely.
And that's some of what we're going to get to see as we look around in here.
Yeah.
So this house being one of our particular common house types called a Creole Cottage. Mm-hmm. People who have spent time in the French Quarter might have seen a Creole Cottage before.
Yes.
And it might be somewhat different from this one. So expectations would be around like a house right up against the sidewalk, fairly enclosed, not having a gallery, where this is a larger than usual one, has a kind of gallery front porch experience. It's a little bit more, it looks a little bit more sociable, I guess. Mm-hmm. Other things that would stand out about this one in particular compared to what a lot of people might have seen?
Most of the Creole cottages you see in the French Quarter are plaster or stucco over the brick between posts. This one is a sided structure, so that makes it a little bit different. This is a double,
Yeah.
4-bay, galleried Creole Cottage. So
Did
how's
you get
that for
many
some
adjectives?
for some New Orleans architectural lingo?
Bunch of hyphens in there. Yeah, and originally this is a double, which is really common, one building housing 2 units, and we'll see it has been modified.
Yes.
So, and then once you step inside, what you'd expect to see out of one of these historic houses is a really simple 4-room floor plan with no hallways in the front, and we can see that that is not the case in here anymore.
So this was the front parlor, and a 4-bay means there were 4 square rooms, and they pretty much followed one after the other in what we typically know of as like the shotgun style house. And so you can see the front bay here, and then there was probably a sliding, potentially door between the front parlor and the second parlor.
Privacy.
Here, and beautiful. What I love about this house is how intelligently certain aspects of the historical structure are preserved. And one of those is the exposed brick fireplace. So the house has 6 fireplaces. And they're all exposed brick like this, so you can still see that sort of old world kind of quality to them. And in certain areas, you can even see the gas line is still left preserved for the old gas line, just to sort of give a nod to that historical perspective.
Yeah, we just keep those things for the sake of having the vibe, even though like almost nobody has functioning fireplaces in New Orleans anymore now that there's central heat. You get these awesome covers and you get a mantelpiece to show stuff off with. And the brick all throughout. And like, so in a single Creole cottage, you'd have a pass through right here. So you'd have 4 rooms that go in a square, but we can see where a wall used to be on this one that was removed to open these up to each other. That's awesome.
Yes. And what's great about this is you can really design the house in any way that you want. There's not necessarily a defined room that says this is your living room. I mean, you can put your dining room really in any of these rooms that you want. One area can be an office, one area can be a living space. So it's very versatile and can really be utilized in any way that makes sense for the people who are living here.
Yeah, and historically, these downstairs front rooms were social rooms by and large. And another of the big hallmarks of these historic New Orleans houses is you don't have hallways, but you also don't have closets originally. And so like when I see a chest of drawers in here, like armoires everywhere would have been the thing originally. And when you retrofit them later with modern conveniences, besides adding AC and heating, you add things like closets.
Yeah, it's a seriously, it's a magical find when you have a historic house with a closet in it.
That is so true.
People aren't always prepared for how small the closets are. So that's why they had armoires, and armoires are such a big part of sort of the classical furnishing here. It's because they needed them. They didn't have any other place to put clothing and things.
It's lovely to say armoire. It's not so lovely to need an armoire.
No, it's not. No.
Oh man. Oh, cool. So we have like plaster that's left over from. So there was a removal in here that lets us show the source materials. Man, and you have like these cypress timbers, and you can see the lathe lines on them and everything. And you were telling me, so there's like, you can see a sheen on the brick, and so that's like protection for the historic materials too.
Correct, yes. When you have exposed brick like this, particularly in a hot and humid climate like New Orleans, you want to seal it really well. Otherwise, you'll get moisture seeping in, and it will slowly erode the mortar over time, and the brick will start to lose its integrity. You can see this very clearly on exterior brick as you walk through the French Quarter. And so, particularly on the inside of the house, you don't want any moisture seepage in. It just keeps everything nice and integrated, and it looks good too. Kind of has a nice look about it.
And the stucco would have been a totally critical thing back in, like a legally required thing back in the days when the Spanish crown first kind of put rules around what you were allowed to do with new buildings after a couple of huge fires. And now it's just kind of this luxurious echo of times past.
Yes, and that's a perfect example of what I love so much about this house is how intelligently and thoughtfully a little thing like that was left, so really gives that nod to the history and the story of the home.
Yeah, you can start to get a feel for like past owners and the things that they've thought about. And we have actually, so more in the way of what's changed about the house over going a little further back.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we walk in back here, so like the back of a historic Creole cottage, normally you have your 2 rooms on each side in the front, and then you have either one wide room or like a single room with a couple of little closet-like things in the back. So when we come in here, we're seeing that space where there would have been stairways on both sides.
Yes, there is an upper bay on this house, and both sides would have had an upper floor. So stairs would be needed to get to those, and both homes would have had one. In this house now, there is only one stairway preserved, and the other side in this decoration is used as like a reading nook. You could put a piano or something there as well. But and this back bay is smaller than the front too, and it would have housed not only the stairway but the kitchen as well. Would have been on the back side of the house, in as we get into the 20th century, and completely outside of the house before then.
Yeah, and so that's another difference between this and what you'd see out of the Creole cottages in the French Quarter. Is with them, generally you're seeing an outbuilding, a fully removed separate structure.
Correct.
The space between of which becomes a courtyard, and we'll see what this house's substitute for that is in a little bit. But I mean, the building materials are never so evident as back here. You've got like all this unfinished wood. I mean, finished, but like you see the wood grain, you can see the brick, like everything shows what it's made out of.
These are the original pine floors, and these are some of the best that I've seen in New Orleans. They are impeccably preserved. This portion of the house, when the remodel was done, had layers of other more modern types of flooring that were meticulously, kind of pulled up, and then the floor underneath it was preserved. So absolutely gorgeous here. And you can see, the transoms over the windows. When I look at old historic structures in New Orleans, I always think, like, how did these people live without air conditioning? Because it's like it's hot. It's June right now when we're filming this, and it's already like a very, very hot in New Orleans. And you can see the details of how they managed climate.
Yeah.
For us, architecture and design is about aesthetic. But in vernacular architecture like this, architecture that existed in a specific time, in a specific place, to meet the needs of the people who were living there during that time. And no air conditioning in New Orleans, and I'm sure it was hot back in the 19th century as well. So the tall ceilings give you like a heat can rise, and the transoms preserved in this house would have been operable. You could open them and get an airflow through. These are decorative, but they're beautifully, beautifully restored. A lot of homes now, they sort of have covered, the transoms have been covered up in like mid-century renovations, and some of those details have just been lost, but this house does a great, great job of preserving those.
And we get more little nods to how this used to work so we also would have had French doors here at one time, and you can see hinges still on either side, and then the little locking mechanism up top. So standard on even like the surviving Creole cottages and a lot of types of Creole houses in the French Quarter, that you would have French doors, 2 separate doors opening from the center, and shutters over that maybe on the back, depending on how storm conscious they were.
I would imagine the exterior of most of the windows would have had storm shutters that you could close. I know on the front of the home, you can still see the hardware from those original shutters, so there were definitely some on this house at some time.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the things, if you like come in and do a short-term stay at a historic New Orleans house, and you're like, they left all these old hinges on it, and like, we love those things. Those are the like the wheel ruts of history. That's where you know where people were and where they went, and we love those clues.
We do.
For some people, I imagine they feel superfluous. You just got to get used to that to really like solve the riddle. And there's also the choice of the things that they had to add, because in this case, like we mentioned, no kitchen in the original floor plan within the building. And so when you want conveniences like that, kitchens, bathrooms, etc., you got to put them somewhere. So in this case, we have, like, as you walk through and look this way, you're in the 20th, 21st century without much of a transition.
Yes.
And then when you look back the other way, you have the back of a 19th century building. It's such a cool combination.
So this portion of the home was added in around 1900. So this is the new addition. 1900 being relatively new for us here in New Orleans. But so the current owner has transformed this into this beautifully lit modern kitchen with all of the modern appliances that you would want, and yet has preserved on the back wall what would have been the exterior wall, and beautifully exposed to show the brick between posts construction style that is how a lot of these Creole cottages were built.
Yeah.
A wood frame and then brick to fill the spaces in between. Very sturdy, which is great for hurricanes here. So, this entire house is built in that way.
I love like looking up in here because you have the original historic eave coming out. Like the choice to include that is super cool. And then so as not to obstruct that, you have this like that you showed me this bathroom view that you like look up through a window and you can see up to that even from this newly added space. It makes you really conscious of the layers of history even when you're in the newest part.
Yeah, and the beaded board ceiling also being a sort of historic nod. At vault, so the vaulting was preserved in the renovation. There was a drop ceiling before, so they sort of went from old to new to somewhere in between with this recent renovation about 5 to 6 years ago. So it's really a beautiful little touch.
I feel like we're in a moment that is particularly cognizant about like love for the old in New Orleans. There is, there is this vogue, I want to say, in a lot of places for local distinctiveness and sort of cultural authenticity, and that architecture is a big piece of that here. And even today, when you look at like shotgun houses, which historically are real working class little homes, like they are in high demand at this point. So, I mean, it makes total sense that in that timeline, you'd have seen someone deciding to, peel a few layers back.
Yeah, I mean, it ebbs and flows. Yeah. Our appreciation and our desire to have those older distinctive things remain kind of comes and goes with time. So we'll go through periods. In the 60s, everything was new. It was the space age. It was shiny. They didn't want old things anymore. And so we lost a lot of that character during that time period. And then now we're definitely starting to see a return to preservation and a way to honor the history and also to enjoy the beauty of it.
And on up. We got a couple little closets squeezed in here and some like cast iron work, like what you'd see on the outside of places like this.
Yeah, I love that it kind of brings that French Quarter feel to the inside.
Oh yeah. So little cozier in the upstairs. And you've got, so you've got the roof line worked into it. Bathroom space over here and
so the whole upstairs, what would have been the two upper bays, opened up and made into one big master suite here on the upper level. And behind this wall, which you can't see, is the dormers preserved with two big closets. So there are modern closets hidden behind the wall here. But yeah, this entire upper space, just beautiful master suite. These great little spaces. You could have a seating space here, sleeping space, and your little study or reading nook there, which I love. So yeah, beautiful work up here. Another great place to see where the original walls dividing the two would have been.
Right across me. Yeah. And a lot of these historic New Orleans interiors, the upstairs is the more residential portion versus the more social portion, and the downstairs of the building. So this is preserving the functionality of the original space too. And the dormers, like the name kind of suggests, like dormitories, a place for sleeping where you would have a breeze crossing right over you, but elevated up above where you find quite as many mosquitoes and so on. So again, the comforts of today have improved on the comforts of the past. So we have very different uses for dormers now, but yet again, they are this kind of romantic presence, even with the benefit of having their purpose reassigned.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to note that in neighborhoods like Treme, the corner lots would have often been stores.
Oh yeah.
So some of these Creole cottages that are on the corners of the block were storefronts below, and the family or the proprietor lived upstairs. So this was the living quarters for some of those structures that had commercial spaces down below.
And you generally know that by seeing a diagonal door on the building as well that faces right out onto the corner. And Lil Dizzy's was one of those.
Yes,
yeah,
I think,
right next door.
Yeah.
So,
and you can spot them all over. If you know what you're looking at, then you can definitely see, oh, that was a storefront prior to it being a residential space.
And some of them have gotten turned into houses. Houses have gotten turned into businesses.
Yeah.
Zoning is all over the place out here.
I know it can feel like it's a lot by lot, scenario, which isn't always true, but yeah, we've done a lot of flipping back and forth
also
over time.
Seeing the attic, and I'm going to just restrain my temptation.
Are you an attic crawler? Do you like to go up attic?
Totally. The coolest stuff is up there. So
there probably is some really
leave
great
that for
stuff
your
up there.
in-person tour of the house.
So there is a great view of a beautiful backyard from up here. So follow me and I'll show you.
Yeah.
I love this little desk, this little reading sort of area or working area with the beautiful yard laid out before you. A great long slope roof. If you're one who likes to sneak out onto rooftops.
This is stargazing
as I
turf
am,
right here.
yes. This is wonderful for stargazing and just kind of sitting out on the roof at night. But beautiful, beautiful view of the lush green backyard.
Shall we go down and check it out?
Yeah, let's do it. There's some great plants back there. Oh, I love it out here.
So like as soon as I look at this, I'm like, wow, it's summer. So
Yeah.
hydrangeas.
Absolutely. The subtropical climate in New Orleans in its full beauty and show state here in this backyard.
And like we like to have we like to let nature play a role in the design of things, such that there's a touch of wildness about it. Goodness.
Yeah. And there's beautiful hydrangeas. I mean, they're just gorgeous at this time.
We've got magnolias coming in.
Yeah. And the jasmine just finished for since the spring. So in the springtime, the jasmine would have been just really, really fragrant out here. I know, right? Don't you want to come back every season and see what's happening in this yard?
Totally. And we've got a camellia bush over here.
Some camellias and hibiscus.
Oh.
Here also.
Oh yeah. Got some buds on this still. Yeah.
These are called, I don't know what the scientific name is, but they're called bicycle seats. And they are very hard to find in nurseries here because they're incredibly popular. They will survive any hard freeze that hits them. And so a lot of these plants are subtropical, and our weather is subtropical. Every now and then we get a freeze, and some of them would be momentarily hurt by that. But then as soon as the weather warms up, they pop right back up. With these bicycle seats, they're beautiful like this, no matter what temperature it gets.
Yeah, and just kind of naturally fits right by the water, has that kind of lily pad look without having to actually be down in it.
Yeah.
Man, ferns galore. This is what you want in a shady space.
It feels like a secret garden.
Yeah, totally. And it does, like, as like a good English garden does, it kind of weaves you back and forth. There's like many different moments of experience. And too, like when I look out here, so when I think about what these open outdoor spaces would have been, they were aesthetic, but they were also super practical. This was your potager, your kitchen garden, and so you had all your herbs and everything, and you'd have your fruit trees and so on in the rest of it. And so when I see that someone is still using their backyard to inform their kitchen, that's like...
I love that. Herb garden right out the kitchen door. There is a lemon tree, a Meyer lemon tree, a key lime tree, and an orange tree back here. So that sort of, the feel of that and the functionality of that remains here.
And we can say, just for context, though this wouldn't necessarily, we're not aware, but wouldn't necessarily have been the case with this house, that more often than not, what you'd have on the back of most Creole cottages is, minus this addition, of course, we'd have a courtyard space in the French Quarter, and then somewhere very close probably to where we're standing, typical distance, would have been a small 2-story building serving any number of purposes, some combination of kitchen, slave quarters, servant quarters, stables, carriage house, any number of those things, but not in this case.
The Treme was a lot of working class. You certainly had professionals and developers and prospectors of real estate very active here. but a lot of people were working class. And so if you do have any sort of domestic help, you might have one room for a maid, and that would be all that you would need.
Yeah. It's worth pointing out too, so this particular street, we're on Esplanade Avenue, plays a really interesting role in the picture of the Treme at large. Like, one of the reasons why the Treme was a more working class neighborhood and therefore a largely black neighborhood was the lower elevation that most of it has compared with the French Quarter, and the fact that it was relatively flood prone. Hence, when you look at a house like this, even though this one's not in a flood zone, a lot of them are up off the ground a little ways.
Yeah.
But we are actually in this house on the Esplanade Ridge.
Yes.
And that puts us on in really kind of a space that is even more ancient than the French Quarter.
Yes.
We are on what gets, I've heard, called the oldest road in the United States. This path from the Mississippi to Lake Pontchartrain via Bayou St. John that was the Native American trade route through this region.
Absolutely.
And they chose it for its elevation.
Absolutely.
So it is practical today in a way that it has been practical for like 1,000 odd years at this point.
Yes, and the real estate along that Esplanade Ridge, and it was the Bayou Road. There's a bayou in New Orleans, up just a little bit closer to the lake than where we are now, and it flowed a lot closer to the French Quarter than it does today. But the real estate along that area was the first real estate settled here, even before the French Quarter.
Yeah, and what you're referring to, Bayou St. John, is actually a place that we may be exploring in a deeper way fairly
That's my
soon.
neighborhood. I'm so excited. Yeah.
Yeah. You ever done it from the water?
Oh, no.
All right, well.
Can I come with you guys?
Watch this space.
I would love that. That would be so fun.
Awesome yard, like something blooming every season. You got magnolias that are just about to bud out. We've got the hydrangeas. I can see some gardenias. So there's going to be something going on here kind of all times of the year. Even like citrus is going to lend some cheer in the winter.
Yes.
So we've got, something to see all the time back here. Y'all, if you like what we just did and you'd like to see more houses like this, because God knows there's a whole lot more interesting historic houses in town, let us know, because Kayla's going to have more of these come to her attention.
Yes.
More people in New Orleans are going to want to have their houses shown off to share with y'all. So let us know if you'd like more of that, and we will certainly keep these coming. And if you enjoyed what happened, Kayla was our tour guide today, so you'll find her tipping information down in the description. Anything else we should say before we sign off, Kayla?
No. You guys have any questions about real estate in New Orleans? Reach out, send me a message. I'd love to talk to you guys about it.
Every specialty under the sun here at Free Tours by Foot, and really even just within this one brain. Thanks for Kayla for making this happen for us. Yeah, you guys have a great time. See you next time.